While I was lying on a hospital bed, my body cut open, and one of my organs being removed to save his mother's life, Marcus showed up at that same hospital with another woman on his arm. That is not a metaphor. That is not a figure of speech. That is exactly what happened to Simone Bridges on the most vulnerable, most selfless day of her life. And what happened next will make you rethink everything you believe about loyalty, sacrifice, love, and the price a Black woman pays when she loves someone more than they deserve. Before we go any further, if you are watching this right now and you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I need you to pause for just a second. Not to skip over, not to come back later. Right now. Here is why I am asking you directly. Most of the people who watch these videos, sometimes hundreds of thousands of them, never subscribe. They watch, they feel something deep in their chest, and then they scroll away. But the people who do subscribe, the ones who join this community, they are the ones who show up every time a story like this drops. They are the ones in the comments every week saying, "This hit different," and "I needed this today." That is the group I am building. And I believe you are smart enough and moved enough by real stories like this one to join it. So hit subscribe right now. Hit the like button because you already know this story is going to be worth it. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Australia, Manchester, Netherlands, Nigeria, Canada. I want to know where my community lives. Now let us get back to Simone.
Simone Bridges was 34 years old, a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. She had a voice that made patients feel safe, hands that stayed steady under pressure, and a heart that had always been, by her own admission, too wide open for her own good. She had grown up in a two-bedroom house in southwest Atlanta with her grandmother Dorothy, who used to say, "Baby, your kindness is your superpower. Just make sure you don't let the wrong people use it against you." Simone had met Marcus Webb 3 years earlier at a fundraiser for sickle cell awareness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a warm laugh and the kind of eyes that made you feel like the most important person in the room. He was a financial advisor with a mid-level firm in Buckhead, drove a sleek luxury sedan, and spoke about his mother, Claudette, with a tenderness that made Simone fall even harder for him. He called Claudette every Sunday without fail. He kept her framed photo on his desk at work. He once said in the quiet of Simone's apartment late one night that his mother was the reason he believed in strong women. Simone loved him for that. She loved him completely. By the end of their first year together, Simone had become close with Claudette Webb. The older woman was sharp, funny, deeply faithful, and suffering quietly from chronic kidney disease that had progressed into end-stage renal failure. Claudette had been on the national transplant waiting list for nearly 2 years. The list was long. Time was not on her side. Her condition was deteriorating month by month, each doctor's visit delivering news that was a little bit darker than the one before. Simone had watched it happen with the practiced eye of a healthcare professional who understood exactly what the labs meant, exactly what the trend lines pointed toward. She had sat at Claudette's kitchen table on Sunday afternoons and helped the older woman manage her medications, reviewed her fluid restrictions with her, and stayed calm when Claudette expressed the quiet, exhausted fear that comes from living inside a body that is slowly failing you. She loved Claudette not because she was Marcus's mother, but because Claudette was simply, genuinely worth loving. A woman who had raised a son alone after her husband left, who had worked 2 jobs for years without complaint, who could still make the entire room laugh with a single, well-timed observation. She deserved more time. Simone felt this in her bones. It was Simone, not Marcus. He who first brought up the idea of live donor testing. She sat across from Marcus at their dining table one evening, in his well-appointed midtown condo, the city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. She said it the way she said most important things, quietly, clearly, with her hands folded on the table. "I want to get tested for your mother." Marcus put down his fork. "Simone, I know what I'm saying. I'm a nurse. I understand the risks better than most people. But she's running out of time, Marcus, and I love her. Let me at least find out if I'm compatible." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hands in his. "You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known," he said. "You know that?" She smiled. She squeezed his hands back. She thought, in that moment, that they were building something permanent together. The compatibility test came back 6 weeks later. Simone Bridges was a near-perfect match for Claudette Webb. Blood type, tissue markers, organ size. The transplant team at Emory University Hospital called it one of the most favorable donor profiles they had seen in years. The lead nephrologist, Dr. Patricia Okafor, sat with both Simone and Marcus and walked them through the procedure, the recovery timeline, the long-term implications for Simone's remaining kidney. She was thorough and direct and gave Simone every possible reason to reconsider. Simone did not waver for a single moment. The surgery was scheduled for the third Tuesday of March. Claudette wept when she was told. She held Simone's face in both of her hands in the hospital consultation room and said, "God sent you to us. Nara, baby, I know he did." Simone wiped the older woman's tears and said, "You're going to be fine, Ms. Claudette, I promise." In the weeks leading up to the surgery, Simone underwent a battery of preoperative evaluations: cardiac screening, psychological assessment, nutritional analysis, blood work every few days. She adjusted her work schedule, arranged for a colleague to cover her shifts, and moved some of her personal savings to cover living expenses during her recovery. She told her grandmother Dorothy about the donation. Dorothy was quiet for a long time, then said, "Does that boy know what he has in you?" Simone laughed softly. "He does, Grandma." Dorothy said nothing more, but her expression said plenty. Marcus, for his part, was attentive in those final weeks. He drove Simone to her pre-op appointments. He stocked her refrigerator with healthy food. He held her hand during the preoperative consultation when the surgical risks were reviewed in clinical detail. He told her he loved her. He told her his mother would not be alive without her. He said all the right things, in all the right tones, at all the right moments. The night before the surgery, they lay together in the stillness of his condo. The city hummed outside. Simone stared at the ceiling, processing the enormity of what she was about to do. Not with fear, but with a deep, settled calm. She was giving a part of herself, literally, to keep the mother of the man she loved alive. It was the most profound act of her life. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked softly in the dark. "No," she said, and she meant it. "I'll be there when you wake up," he said. She turned to him and smiled. "And I know you will." She closed her eyes. Surgery day arrived cold and overcast, the Atlanta sky pale and heavy the way it gets in early spring. Simone was admitted at 5:30 in the morning, dressed in a hospital gown, IV line placed in her left arm, the familiar smell of antiseptic and institutional calm wrapping around her like a second skin. She knew this environment. She worked in it. But being on the other side of the gurney was different in ways she had not fully anticipated. She felt small in a way she rarely felt. Human in a way she did not always let herself be. Claudette was prepped 2 floors above her. The transplant team coordinated with precision. Dr. Okafor visited Simone briefly before the procedure, reviewed the plan one final time, and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You are doing something remarkable today," she said. Simone nodded. She asked one of the nurses to let Marcus know she was going in. The nurse came back a few minutes later and said he had acknowledged the message and was on his way. Simone was wheeled into the operating theater at 7:45 in the morning. The surgery lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. She woke in the post-anesthesia care unit at just after 1 in the afternoon, her throat dry, her side aching with a deep, bone-level soreness that the pain medication only partially blunted. She blinked at the ceiling. A nurse, young, with kind eyes, leaned over her. "You're out, Miss Bridges. Everything went beautifully." Simone exhaled. She asked about Claudette. The nurse told her the transplant had been successful. Claudette was stable and recovering. Simone closed her eyes and felt something move through her chest that was bigger than relief. She asked for Marcus. The nurse checked the waiting room log, then checked again, then stepped outside briefly. When she came back, her expression was carefully neutral in the way that medical professionals learn to make their faces when they are holding something back. She said, "Your fiancé is in the building. We'll let him know you're awake." Simone noticed the pause. She filed it away the way a nurse files away a vital sign that is slightly off. Noted, not yet alarmed. It was Simone's colleague and closest friend, Aaliyah Cooper, who told her the truth. Aaliyah had arrived at the hospital during the surgery, a bag of Simone's favorite herbal tea and a novel tucked under her arm, ready to keep watch in the waiting room the way good friends do. She had been there for 3 hours, and for most of those 3 hours, she had watched Marcus Webb sit in that waiting room with a woman who was not Simone. The woman's name, Simone would later learn, was Destiny Hargrove. She was 29, a marketing consultant from Decatur, and she had arrived at Emory University Hospital that Tuesday afternoon, clinging to Marcus Webb's arm as though she belonged there. Aaliyah described them in a low, careful voice from the chair beside Simone's recovery bed. Her eyes steady, her hands folded, the way you hold yourself when you are delivering news that could break someone. They sat close. They talked quietly. He got her coffee from the vending machine down the hall. At one point, he had his hand on her lower back. Simone lay still throughout Aaliyah's account. Her side throbbed. The IV dripped. The monitoring equipment beeped its steady and different rhythm. She was still in the immediate aftermath of a major surgical procedure, her body running on controlled pain medication and careful monitoring, and she was receiving this news in a hospital bed where she had been brought after giving up an organ to sustain another human being's life. The cruelty of the timing was almost incomprehensible. Later she would reflect on it with a dark, bewildered kind of wonder. Not at Marcus, but at the sheer architecture of how the universe sometimes arranges its worst moments. That she had been on an operating table while he sat in the waiting room with another woman. That her body had been opened and carefully closed while he got someone else coffee from a vending machine down the hall. That she had woken up asking for him while he was somewhere in the building, with his hand on someone else's back. It was the kind of thing you could not make up if you tried. When Aaliyah finished, Simone said nothing for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "How long?" Aaliyah pressed her lips together. "Baby, I don't know for sure." "How long do you think?" Aaliyah exhaled through her nose. "Based on the way they were around each other?" "A while." The room felt very small. The afternoon light through the blinds was thin and gray. Simone looked down at the bandage over the incision on her left side, the physical evidence of what she had just given, and something inside her went very still. Not the stillness of peace, the stillness that arrives just before everything inside you reorganizes itself forever. Marcus came in 45 minutes later. He was wearing a charcoal overcoat, the expensive kind, tailored at the shoulders, the kind he wore when he was trying to make a particular impression. He smelled faintly of a cologne Simone did not recognize. He sat down beside her bed, took her hand and said, "You were amazing today, Simone. Truly." She looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Who is Destiny Hargrove?" she said. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. Simone had spent years reading patients, their faces, their breathing patterns, the micro-expressions that told her more than their words ever did. She read Marcus in those 4 seconds the way she read an EKG strip. Every piece of information she needed was right there. His jaw tightened. His eyes shifted left, then came back to her. "Where did you hear that name?" "Answer the question, Marcus." He sat back. He exhaled. And then, with the kind of composure that only comes from having rehearsed a moment many times in private, he said, "She's a friend. We've been going through some things. I didn't mean for you to find out like this." "You brought her to this hospital," Simone said. Her voice was low and level. "Today, while they were taking out my kidney to give to your mother." He had the grace, at least, to look ashamed. He looked at his hands. "I know how this looks." "Do you?" She studied him. "Tell me what you think it looks like." He did not answer. She pulled her hand from his. The full scope of it took days to surface. During her hospital recovery, 4 days in a monitored room, then a careful return to her grandmother's house in southwest Atlanta, where Dorothy fussed over her and prayed over her and fed her soup thick enough to stand a spoon in. The details came in pieces. Aaliyah brought what she had found. A mutual friend confirmed timelines. An ill-advised social media post from Destiny's account, since deleted but screenshot by several people, suggested the relationship had been ongoing for at least 8 months. 8 months. Simone had been tested, cleared, prepared, and operated on across a span of roughly 6 weeks. The affair had been running in the background the entire time. Marcus called, he texted. He sent a formal arrangement of flowers to Dorothy's house that Dorothy accepted with a polite thank you and then placed directly in the kitchen trash can. He asked for a chance to explain. He said there were things Simone did not understand about the pressure he was under. He said destiny meant nothing serious. He said he had never stopped loving Simone. Simone did not respond to any of it. What she did during those long, quiet days of recovery, lying in the bedroom she had slept in as a teenager, her grandmother's gospel music drifting through the walls, was think. She thought about the woman she had been when she met Marcus. Already whole, already accomplished, already good. She thought about the 2 years she had shaped around his preferences, his schedule, his mother's illness, his comfort. She thought about how thoroughly she had reorganized her priorities around someone who had been quietly looking elsewhere the whole time. She thought about Claudette. This was the part that was complicated, the part that kept her up past the pain medication some nights. Claudette Webb was now living with Simone's kidney inside her body. Claudette was recovering well. Dr. Okafor's follow-up reports, which Simone received as a fellow medical professional, confirmed that the organ had integrated without rejection. Claudette was going to live. She was going to have years she would not otherwise have had. Years of Sunday phone calls with her son. Years of being present in the world. Those years existed because of what Simone had given, and Simone did not regret it. That was the truth she kept arriving at, no matter how many times she walked away from it and came back. She did not regret donating the kidney, not because of Marcus. She had released him from the equation almost immediately, but because Claudette was a good woman who deserved to live, and Simone's capacity for love had never been conditional on being loved back in equal measure. Her grandmother had raised her to understand that acts of genuine generosity belong to you, not to the person you gave them to. No one could take the meaning of it away from her by behaving badly afterward. That clarity did not make the betrayal hurt less. It just kept the pain from becoming permanent. 3 weeks into her recovery, Claudette herself appeared at Dorothy's door. She came alone in a car driven by her sister, moving slowly but steadily, her color better than Simone had seen it in a year. She stood on the porch with a covered dish of banana pudding and eyes full of something that could not be organized into any comfortable emotion. Dorothy opened the door, assessed the situation in approximately 1 second, and let her in. Simone was in the living room, propped on the couch with a pillow behind her. She looked up when Claudette came in and said nothing. Claudette set the dish on the coffee table, lowered herself carefully into the armchair across from Simone, and sat with her hands in her lap. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. "I didn't know," Claudette said finally. Her voice was rough. "About destiny, about any of it. I want you to know that first." Simone studied her. "I believe you. I raised that boy better than what he did to you." Claudette's jaw was tight. "And I need you to know that I am ashamed of him." "Ms. Claudette?" "No." The older woman shook her head firmly. "Let me finish. You put yourself on an operating table for me. You gave up a piece of your body, something you can never get back, because you love my son and you love me. And while you were doing that," her voice broke. She steadied it. "I am sorry, baby. I am truly, deeply sorry." Simone felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for weeks. She said, "Your son's choices are not your apology to make." "Maybe not, but I'm making it anyway." Claudette looked at her with wet eyes. "And I'm asking you if you can ever find it in your heart, not to let what Marcus did make you hate what you did, because what you did was beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful things one human being has ever done for another. And I will carry it with me every day I'm alive." Simone looked at this woman who was breathing more easily today than she had in years, whose color was returning, whose body was healing because of a gift given in love. And she felt the pain and the grace of it settle into each other like two rivers meeting. She reached out and took Claudette's hand. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just holding on. 2 months after the surgery, Simone Bridges went back to work. She returned to Grady Memorial on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week she had been wheeled into that operating theater with 1 kidney less than she left home with. Her colleagues greeted her with a warmth that threatened to undo her composure in the middle of the nurses' station. Her unit manager, a no-nonsense Jamaican-American woman named Patricia, hugged her for a full 10 seconds and said, "You good?" And Simone said, "I'm good." And she meant it more than she had expected to. She threw herself back into work. Long shifts, complicated cases, the relentless physical and emotional demands of acute care nursing. Some people heal by going still. Simone had always healed by being useful. There was something in the rhythm of the work, the charting, the assessments, the conversations at bedsides with patients who needed someone to hear them, that reminded her who she was when nobody was watching. Not Marcus Webb's girlfriend. Not a cautionary tale. Just a woman who was exceptionally good at helping people survive. She knew what it meant to be vulnerable in a medical setting. She knew what it meant to need someone steady beside you. She brought that knowledge into every room she entered, and patients felt it. Families felt it. She was assigned to a young woman who had just come through a complicated transplant surgery of her own, and Simone sat with her during the roughest post-operative night and talked her through the fear with the quiet authority of someone who had been on both sides of the procedure. The woman's mother pulled Simone aside the next morning, eyes red, and said, "I don't know what you said to her last night, but she's not scared anymore." Simone just shook her head. She was never not brave, she said. She just needed someone to remind her. That was the work. That had always been the work, and it held her together the way good work always does, by giving shape to days that might otherwise have collapsed into grief. The story, predictably, it had leaked beyond her immediate circle. Atlanta's professional community is intimate in the way of any city where ambitious Black people have built significant networks, and word had traveled. Simone did not discuss it at work, but she knew people knew. She caught the looks, some sympathetic, some simply curious, the way humans are always curious about other people's disasters. She ignored them with the same quiet discipline she brought to everything else. What she did not ignore was the private message she received 5 weeks after returning to work from a woman named Dr. Janelle Osei. Dr. Osei was the founder of a nonprofit organization called Renewed Life, which focused on expanding living organ donation awareness specifically within Black communities, where donation rates remained critically and disproportionately low, despite the fact that Black Americans represented a significant percentage of patients on the national transplant waiting list. Dr. Osei had heard Simone's story through a colleague at Emory and was reaching out to ask if Simone would be willing to share it publicly, to speak at conferences, to record a testimonial for their campaign, to be a visible face of what voluntary living donation looked like from the donor side. Simone sat with the message for 3 days before she responded. She thought about what it meant to have her most painful experience become a public story. She thought about whether there was something extractive about that, whether she would be performing her grief for other people's consumption. She thought about her grandmother, Dorothy, who had always said that the purpose of surviving hard things was to make sure your survival meant something to someone else. She responded to Dr. Osei. She said yes. What followed reshaped the next chapter of Simone's life in ways she could not have scripted. She spoke at a kidney disease awareness summit in Atlanta, then at a Black Health Equity conference in Houston, then at a community health event in Chicago. She was not a polished public speaker when she started. She was precise and honest and occasionally more raw than she intended to be, and audiences responded to that rawness with a recognition that was almost physical. After her second speaking engagement, a woman found her in the corridor outside the conference room and grabbed both of her hands and said, "I've been on the transplant list for 14 months. Nobody ever made me feel like I mattered enough for someone to choose me." Simone held that woman's hands and said, "You matter. You absolutely matter." She meant every syllable. Her professional life expanded. The nonprofit work led to an invitation to join a hospital advisory panel on donor-patient relations. She began contributing to a healthcare blog on racial disparities in organ transplantation outcomes. She enrolled in a part-time graduate program in public health at Georgia State, something she had been considering for years but had deferred. The way women in relationships sometimes defer their own ambitions to maintain the pace and comfort of someone else's life. She was busy. She was purposeful. She was healing in the forward direction, which is the only direction healing actually moves. Marcus Webb, for his part, said he had a difficult several months. Destiny Hargrove ended their relationship within weeks of the hospital incident, reportedly uncomfortable with the public narrative that had formed around it. His mother, Claudette, maintained a civil but unmistakably cooled relationship with him, not cutting him off entirely because she was his mother, but making her disappointment a quiet and permanent presence between them. Several of his professional contacts, people who knew Simone or knew of her, became less available for the golf games and networking dinners that had previously populated his calendar. He was not destroyed. He was not publicly humiliated in any dramatic way, but he was diminished in the ways that matter, in the quality of the people around him, in the ease of moving through a community that had quietly reassessed him. He sent Simone one final message 9 months after the surgery. It was long and careful and took clear responsibility in a way his earlier messages had not. He said he had been in therapy. He said he now understood, in a way he had not before, what his actions had cost both of them. He said he did not expect forgiveness and was not asking for it, but he needed her to know that not a day passed when he did not understand what she had done and what he had squandered. He said she was the best person he had ever known. Simone read the message twice. She felt the truth in it. She also felt the completeness of her own distance from it. Not bitterness, not residual longing, just a clean and final recognition that this chapter was closed. She did not respond. There was nothing left to say. She put the phone down on her desk. Edith looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline she had grown up beneath and breathed. That was the thing about surviving a difficult season. Eventually you stop waiting for a final dramatic closing moment and realize the closing has already happened, quietly somewhere along the way. She was already on the other side. She simply had to keep walking. What she held on to instead was something that happened on a warm Saturday in October, 10 months after the surgery. She was at a cookout at Aaliyah's house in East Atlanta, the yard full of music and laughter and the smell of ribs and sweet cornbread. The kind of afternoon that reminds you that joy is not something you have to earn back after it's been taken. It's simply something you return to when you're ready. Dorothy was there, settled in a lawn chair with a plate balanced on her lap. She was talking too loudly and laughing at her own stories the way she always did. And Claudette Webb was there too. Aaliyah had quietly arranged it, some months earlier, having formed her own friendship with Claudette through Simone's orbit, and had extended the invitation knowing that Simone was ready. The two women found each other near the dessert table. Claudette looking well, moving easily, her eyes bright with the particular vitality of someone who has been given time they did not expect to have. She smiled when she saw Simone. Simone smiled back. They did not have a grand cinematic conversation. They ate together. They laughed at Dorothy's stories. Claudette told Simone about the garden she had planted in her backyard, the first garden she had had the energy and health to maintain in years. She said she had planted dahlias because someone had once told her they were resilient flowers, bright and complicated and harder to kill than they looked. She looked at Simone when she said it with a small, meaningful smile. Simone understood what she meant. Later that evening, as the sun dropped behind the tree line and the yard filled with the blue hour light of early autumn, Simone sat beside her grandmother and leaned her head against the old woman's shoulder the way she had as a child. Dorothy put an arm around her. They listened to the music. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass and the end of a long season. "You doing okay, baby?" Dorothy asked. Simone thought about it honestly, the way she did everything. "Yeah, Grandma," she said. "I really am." Dorothy patted her arm. "I know you are. I always knew you would be." And she was right, because Simone Bridges had done the hardest, most generous thing a person can do, and she had done it for the right reasons, and no one, not Marcus Webb, not betrayal, not loss, had been able to take that from her. She had walked through the fire and come out not smaller, but refined, not broken, but rebuilt into something more precisely herself. She was a woman who had given from her truest place and who had discovered, on the other side of the deepest hurt of her life, that her capacity to give had not diminished. It had simply found better direction. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Moral lesson. The story of Simone Bridges carries several truths that deserve to be examined carefully, because they speak to something real about love, sacrifice, betrayal, and the way human beings rebuild themselves after devastating loss. The first truth is this: Genuine sacrifice belongs to the person who makes it. One of the most painful experiences a person can have is to give something profound and irreversible. Their time, their resources, their health, their absolute best, to someone who does not honor it. The natural human response is to feel that the sacrifice was wasted, that it was foolish, that it diminishes us to have given so much to someone so undeserving. But this is a mistake. Simone's donation of her kidney was not made less meaningful by Marcus Webb's betrayal. The act and the betrayal were separate events. One was noble, the other was shameful. They did not cancel each other out. True generosity is not a transaction. It is not contingent on the recipient's behavior. And when we give from our truest, deepest place, that gift is complete the moment we give it. No one can retroactively contaminate it. The second truth is about the danger of loving someone more than you know yourself. Simone had built a life that accommodated Marcus in ways large and small. She reorganized her schedule, her savings, her body itself around his family's crisis. That level of love and commitment is not wrong. It is beautiful, but it becomes dangerous when the person receiving it does not carry an equivalent weight of accountability. Love should expand you. It should make you more of who you are, not less. When you find yourself giving and giving, while the other person gives less and less, the imbalance eventually breaks something. The lesson is not to love less. It is to love people who understand the value of what you are offering them. The third truth is about community and what it means to let your pain become purposeful. Simone did not transform her experience into a public performance of suffering. She transformed it into service. She took the most difficult, most private ordeal of her life and used it to light a path for other people, particularly Black Americans, who face unique and documented barriers in both donation and access to donor organs. She turned her wound into a window. Not every person needs to do this in the dramatic way Simone did, by speaking at conferences or joining advisory panels. But there is wisdom in asking yourself, after a season of pain, what the experience taught you that might help someone else. That question, honestly answered, can become a compass. The fourth truth concerns the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Simone did not forgive Marcus in a way that reopened the door to him. She released the anger and the grief not for his benefit, but for her own. She understood that carrying rage against him would cost her far more than it would ever cost him. Forgiveness, in this sense, is not an act of generosity toward the person who hurt you. It is an act of self-preservation. It is how you reclaim the emotional energy that betrayal tries to claim permanently. Reconciliation, actually rebuilding a relationship, is a separate and optional step. Simone chose not to take it, and that was a completely valid choice. You can forgive someone and still close the door. Those two things are not in conflict. And the fifth and final truth is perhaps the most important. Your worth is not determined by how you are treated. Simone was treated with profound disrespect on the most selfless day of her life, and she could have internalized that, could have concluded that she was someone to be used and discarded, that her love was not worth honoring, that her sacrifice was foolish. Instead, she arrived at the opposite understanding, that Marcus Webb's choices were a reflection of his character, not hers, that her willingness to give deeply and freely was a strength, not a weakness, that the right people, her grandmother, Claudette, Elia, the community she would eventually build, could see exactly who she was and honor it appropriately. We live in a world that often rewards the ruthless and overlooks the generous. It can be easy, and after a story like Simone's, to conclude that open-heartedness is a liability, but the evidence of her life suggests otherwise. The kidney she gave is still alive inside a woman who plants dahlias in her garden and thinks of her every morning. The stories she tells at conferences are still changing the decisions of people who might otherwise never consider donation. The community she belongs to is richer for having her in it. These are not small outcomes. They are the long, quiet, real consequences of a life lived with integrity. Simone Bridges gave a piece of herself and received something back that no betrayal could take. The knowledge that she was exactly who she believed herself to be. That is worth more than any kidney. That is worth more than any deal. That is worth more than anything else she could have held on to instead. That is worth everything.